enable every single Jamaican, if he has so wishes, to be able to generate his own electricity, or alternatively, to get from the JPA cheaper electricity. And if you'll allow me to just spell out just a few, because I know the government has pivoted towards elections, not growth, but towards elections. And I'm awaiting a strenuous debate on energy, because energy is so important, as you all have come to recognize. In fact, I was disappointed when the Prime Minister spoke last week, Tuesday, about pivoting for growth, because a lot of that pivot, if it is for growth, must be on the energy sector, the electricity sector, which has, because of it, we have not been able to realize significant growth. So let me take it back to 9 years ago, when we came to the culmination of the first phase of this revolution that we started. And that was to transform and diversify our fuel sources away from heavy fuel oil and diesel, which was about 90% of how we generate electricity then, in 2012. That is. We were able by 2016 to transform that to 60% liquefied LNG, natural gas, LNG. We added 20% renewables in that period of time. And the government did not continue in that vein. In fact, if we had continued, especially with the Prime Minister's announced policy of achieving 50% renewables, we would have continued the reduction of the price of electricity. I just want to remind you, in 2016, the price of electricity was about 23 US cents per kilowatt hour. Today, we are back over 40 US cents. All right, so that was the first part of the revolution. I'm disappointed.
So hold on, Mr. Paulwell. So critical to your plan, and when I say your, meaning the opposition's plan, is to add more renewables to the grid as a source, more renewables as a source. At what percentage? We are back up, you say, at a cost of 40 cents per kilowatt hour. Yes, but in terms of the input from renewables, we're way below where we ought to have been. Yes? Where is that now, and where do you want to take it to?
All right. So our policy, ultimately, we want to get a national price of about 18 US cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. We believe that in that ballpark, our economy stands a greater chance. Now, since 2016, we have not added anything new. The Minister of Energy is about to announce 2 licenses that have been procured after 9 years to bring a total of 100 megawatts of capacity. And we applaud that, but it is mighty late. And you know why? These licensees will be generating electricity using solar at less than 8 US cents per kilowatt hour. So can you imagine if that had happened 3 or so years ago, where would we be now? Our drive is to coincide with the Prime Minister's vision of getting to 50%, is on day one to move rapidly to another procurement for another 100 or so megawatts of solar. And the reason why we are focusing on solar is that we have seen over the last decade a massive reduction in the price of panels. We have seen reduction in the price of inverters, but more so, we have seen reductions in the price and improvement in the technology for battery storage, which has always been an issue with these intermittent renewable sources.
So with the 100 megawatt, and we have Tyrone with us. Tyrone, you can come in when you want.
Yeah, man, I'm listening to the Foreign Minister.
Yes. With the addition of 100 megawatts that is coming, or to be announced, that doesn't mean it's going to come. Yeah. What timeline are we looking at for that 100 megawatt, and where would that take us in terms of the percentage of renewables as a source?
Yeah. Well, the government is is to announce it. It will take some time to get on stream, especially if you don't have a minister who is pushing for these things, because the licensees now will have to go and negotiate a power purchase agreement, and then from the commencement of construction to the switching on of the generation will be long into the PNP's term by 2027. So I can also pivot to elections, you know. but I this at 100 megawatts will bring us probably about 25-26%. We still have a long way to go if we're going to get to 50%.
So,
and yes,
go to your plan now. Yes, how are you going to get the renewable partners into the game? What strategy are you going to be using to get them here to the table faster than what we have seen from the Holness administration?
All right, so we do have a manifold number of inputs that will enable us to achieve that. I have been speaking about electricity theft and the fact that when you refuse, you pay your electricity bill. Between 17 and 20% of that bill is because of the 200,000 households that are now stealing electricity, which is greater than when the government owned the JPS. You know, in 2001, when we sold the JPS, we were experiencing less electricity theft than we are doing now. The way to correct that is first of all the government to recognize that it has a responsibility to do so, that it can't be the burden on JPS alone. And the plan that we have put forward 2.5 years now on the standing orders paper in Parliament was to utilize some of those resources. We collect about $7 billion per annum for this energy hedge tax. I tell you, we could use those resources to deploy microgrids within these poor communities using solar technology to over time completely solve this problem, where on a house top roof in open space within our communities, we'll be able to deploy panels, we'll be able to connect the houses together under one microgrid, and over time to cut this pernicious practice of people stealing electricity, in large measure due to the high level of poverty. And at the same time we're doing that, we also have to recognize that some of the stealing takes place uptown as well enough. And we have to bring the full force of the law. And those penalties were increased by in 2015 to up to $5 million on imprisonment. But people have just not been pushing to activate the provision of the law.
I'm happy you mentioned that, Mr. Paulwell, because isn't it the case that the lion's share of what is stolen from JPS is from, it isn't necessarily from residential customers? If my memory serves me correct, is that the lion's share of it is from the 200,000 home owners, home occupiers in lower income communities. But they represent the lion's share. Yes, a significant amount of it is from uptown, but the lion's share, if you think about of 200,000 homes stealing electricity, that's where the bulk of it is. And I believe that it requires now this type of revolutionary approach to solve it once and for all. And I want to go back to what you mentioned, because I was listening to get broadly what are the parameters of this revolutionary plan regarding energy that you're putting on the table. And you did mention solar as a form of renewable energy, exploring that in a more broader context. I recall many years ago, I was at the Gleaner at this time, Mr. Paulwell, I think it was 2012. I just did a quick search, and on July 6, 2012, there was an article about you switching to solar. Do you recall that article? You switched your supply at home to solar. Do you still do that, Minister?
Of course, because unfortunately,
I get into the question. So I'm happy to hear that you're still doing it. So that was 2012. I gather you were energy minister at the time, were you?
Yes, I was doing that
to demonstrate to the country that you can make the transformation. Yeah.
Good. So 2012, the JLP would have taken over back in 2016, right? So how far along did you manage to get this national push at that time? Because you did it at your home, but how far along? What else did you get done during your tenure as energy minister to advance this national agenda to move towards solar?
Yes. Well, as I mentioned earlier, in 2013, we did a procurement for additional wind, and we expanded Wigton. We established a new wind project in Malvern, St. Elizabeth, and we created the single largest solar farm at the time in the Caribbean by content in Clarendon. We also granted over 700 licenses to small producers, people who benefited from this net billing arrangement, so you could generate electricity for yourself using solar, and you could also sell the excess amount to the grid. All of those things have pretty much been discontinued and certainly not expanded the way we had envisaged. We also wanted to ensure that those large companies that were generating for themselves, they could use the grid to transport their electricity to their other businesses elsewhere in the country. Those things did not happen as was intended. And the revolution, though, the true revolution, is when you, Tyrone and Cliff, and those other users out there start to install on their roofs their own panels, their inverters, their batteries, and the ability to sell the additional capacity, cheaper capacity, to the grid.
I hear you on it, former Minister Paulwell, but you did mention that the prices are coming down with regards to the installation, acquiring the equipment and installing it. The prices are coming down. But in terms of how do we get this from being an idea that broadly many Jamaicans can afford, because it's really the barrier to entry is the cost, you know. How do we get it to the point? Can we seek to get into business with some manufacturers of these kinds of solar equipment to see if we can get some wholesale prices on it? What do you have in mind to make this more affordable for the average Jamaican?
So one of the aims behind NESOL, which no longer exists, was to be able for Jamaica, because those panels you spoke about in 2012, those were procured out of Cuba. And for me, there's no reason why we could not manufacture those, assemble those in Jamaica, and to not only provide for Jamaica, but the rest of CARICOM. I still believe it is durable. But also, it is acknowledged that the price, the upfront cost is prohibitive for some, and I therefore would want to see a greater flow of resources, debt financing, cheap financing through the NHD and elsewhere that is going to enable any Jamaican to access low interest rate funds to acquire their system. And I also want to see greater competition. You know, I'm a competition man. I want to see greater competition because there are still too few suppliers of solar system in the country, and that should not be the case.
And how
the granular details, you haven't necessarily worked out the granular details then, how to make this beneficial to the average Jamaican. You're still working on that.
Well, I can tell you that we have done the details to guarantee that if we follow this path, we'll be able, if you wish to become self-sufficient, we'll be able to take your electricity price from where it is at 40 cents now, down to about half of that, just by transforming to utilizing solar with batteries. It is important that we have batteries, because you're going to, after the sunset, need to be able to keep your system going. I believe that we can.
There's maintenance. There's maintenance costs also associated with the use of solar. What is the plan? Is what I'm asking. Are you prepared to tell us the plan that your administration, an administration formed by the PNP, would put in place to make solar energy affordable for the average Jamaican?
Yes, I'm quite prepared, as I have started to describe for you how we're going to be doing it, starting with dealing with the electricity step, but also to expand to the wider society. There are some important steps that we also have to introduce, and those steps require negotiation with the JPSCO on some of the terms of its license. And one of the things I mentioned today is that while the minister says that he's going to be on the road campaigning, the license comes to an end in 2027, but in 2025 the license requires that the government engages JPSCO. Now, unlike Cable and Wireless, when we had to intervene strenuously in 1999 to deal with that monopoly license, which should have come to an end with 2038. The JPSCO license comes down in 2027. So
when should the engagement begin?
It should begin now. It should begin now. The minister should have his negotiating team ready now, going through the elements that will be put to JPSCO by mid-year 2025. If he doesn't signal to the JPSCO the path that the government wishes to take, a golden opportunity would be missed. And what I said to the minister in my last presentation in the sectoral debate is, let this be a united effort. I can help. We've had the benefit of dealing with cable and wires in the past. There are some things that we need to do now. And there is leverage that we have, because the JPSCO is going to want to survive, and we can enable that, but not at the expense of the consumer.
Some things we can do now, such as what?
Yes.
For example, one of the reasons why we haven't grown as an economy and why this special economic zone has not succeeded is that you can't attract people inside the zone at the current price of electricity. Free it up. Let those persons who are established in these zones be able to supply themselves and their tenants at electricity at 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And you'll be amazed to see how many investors flood to Jamaica.
And when you say free it up, tell me, what you mean?
Break up the monopoly, now, yes. Is that what you're suggesting? Yeah. The distribution monopoly?
What?
So, right now, if you establish a building in a special economic zone, you can't supply to your tenants. The law doesn't allow it. Not the law.
The Electricity Act.
The interpretation of the license doesn't allow it. And so therefore you have to buy electricity from JPSCO at 40 cents per kilowatt hour. I believe in anticipation of the termination of the license, you could today use that leverage and get JPSCO to relent from this issue. It's a win-win for the country if you allow operators in special economic zones to generate electricity and to supply their tenants at a fraction of the cost. And they can do it utilizing solar.
Just to be clear, you're calling for an end to the distribution monopoly that the JPS has.
I am calling for an end to that part of the exclusivity that gives an interpretation that if you're in a special economic zone, you cannot distribute amongst your tenants. My own view is that you should be able to, because the view of the SEZ is that you're not really operating in Jamaica, you're operating for export services and production of goods. That has always been my case, my view. But I believe that at this time, you have an opportunity to use the leverage and to get that concession and to see major growth taking place in the zone.
But based on what you said earlier, this is going to be more than just a facility that could be done in the special economic zone, because you're saying if I, Cliff Hughes, has the wherewithal to set up my own solar system and can sell to my neighbor, you are going to permit me to do that. You said that earlier.
Well, certainly in relation to dealing with electricity theft, we are going to enable that. We want to enable that.
But it will have the same impact. It will shatter the JPS monopoly.
Yes.
No. In relation to the theft of electricity, listen to me out. You are solving a double problem. If you provide, so no JPS group in their right mind could challenge that. If you step in as a government and say you're going to rid the company of the burden of 200,000 households, and you establish for those users their own system. So I don't see that as a problem. I don't see also the problem, the issue of the special economic zone.
Yes,
So
it is going to be a problem, Mr. Paulwell. The economics, yes, the economics of the business is now going to be entirely threatened, undermined.
But you're
I don't know about undermined, but they'll be losing money, Mr. Paulwell.
And losing money means undermined.
You sound just like Cape Town Riders did in
No,
1999.
no.
Don't resist the change. It's gonna happen. Yes.
No, but have
So, Minister, to be clear, you want the special economic zones, the generation and distribution there to be allowed, and you are also saying, based on what Phillip just put to you, that if I can generate as a private citizen enough electricity from solar or whichever other system I'm using, I should be able to sell to my neighbor as well?
Don't take me where I am not yet. Don't take me there.
You said it earlier.
I have cited for you 2 clear-cut cases that are dealing with electricity theft, which is substantial, and that of the special economic zone. Now, in relation to the ability of persons to distribute electricity to their neighbors and elsewhere, those things will have to emerge out of negotiations, and I don't want to start negotiations about JPS license even before we get into office. There are certain things that will have to await that process. But for the 2 areas that I have pointed out, electricity theft and special economic zone, I believe that these are no-brainers. And we should be pushing to get these things done.
But Mr. Paulwell, what you said, I'm a competition man. That's what you told us. Yes, so competition means that Cliff Hughes can set up him solar farm and a piece of property I have up in wherever, Timbuktu, and I can generate for my purpose and for my neighbors. That's what you said earlier.
Just to remind you, we achieved competition out of a process of negotiation. And yes, those negotiations were turbulent at times, but we were able to achieve that final objective.
So Cliff, he's asking you if that's what you were saying earlier, that an individual citizen who can generate electricity from solar or whichever renewable source, and then they should be allowed to sell some of the excess to their neighbors. Are you batting for that?
I am urging you to listen to what I'm saying. And
but we've listened to you, Mr. Powell, and now we're putting it back to you if that's what you're saying.
Yes, and you seem to be backing away from that.
If you listen to me, I'm saying to you, in relation to 2 clear-cut matters, that of electricity theft, which is very substantial, and that of special economic zone, I believe that those things will happen. Other areas of competition must be the subject of negotiation. Must be. So the instance that you're citing, that I can't say today that will definitively happen. Those are objectives, but all of those things will have to come through negotiation.
No, we're not asking you what you think is going to definitively happen. Remember now, you are putting forward, Minister, what your revolutionary plan is for the reduction of electricity cost in the country.
Competition.
And we're asking, is this one of the items on your list? It's a simple question, really.
And I'm saying to you that ultimately we want to see full and open competition, but that there are certain constraints, and I wouldn't want at this stage, apart from the 2 areas that I have cited, to delve into greater detail until we go through that negotiation process. And I think that is quite reasonable.
We're well over time, Mr. Paulwell, but I want to thank you, and we should bring you back. Yes,
Indeed.
we should bring you back because
Yes,
you
because
said
there are other elements to this thing that I would love to
discuss.
To flash out with you.
Yes,
of course.
But you did say in the opening that you made a presentation to your shadow cabinet. Can you say whether they have approved it? They're going to go with it or not?
Well, I believe that the shadow cabinet was sufficiently impressed by some of the elements. It's a working process. And the closer we get to the implementation time, which is after the next election, is the more that they will be scrutinizing certain elements of it. But I think on a whole, the thrust of the presentation was approved.
On a whole, the thrust of the presentation was approved.
Yes.
But Mr. Paulwell,
is
should
that
it be approved so it can be a manifesto? You can't wait until after the election.
That's where I was going.
No, man, it is going to be a critical part of our manifesto.
Right.
Yes.
So
But
they basically approved it for adoption then. They're going to adopt it.
I think if we were to write the manifesto tomorrow, it would be there in its entirety. And it's entitled Power for the People.
And Mr. Paulwell, manifestos are notorious for their lack of readership. Manifestos in Jamaica are also notorious for being published a week or two, at best 3 weeks before the elections. Why should the people of Jamaica be denied an opportunity to have this kind of discussion as we are doing here, yes, in other fora as well, to scrutinize and pick apart and support where it needs support your proposal for this crucial part of the Jamaican economy? Why hide it? Why hide it in a manifesto? You know that nobody not gonna read it when you put it in a manifesto.
And that's the reason why I'm saying to you tonight. I'm saying to you, get Mr. Vaz and myself to debate the future of energy, and I'll be able to be as specific as I can in relation to the other areas that we weren't able to discuss this evening. I think that is what you want to encourage.
Oh, that's an idea. That's an idea. That's an idea.
Good idea. Good idea, actually.
But we're not going to let you off the hook. You need to publish that plan so we can go read it. So when we are doing that debate, we can probe it. Yeah, in the presence of Mr. Vaz.